In 2019, a Chinese spacecraft named Chang'e 4 became the first mission in human history to successfully land on the far side of the moon. What it found was nothing but deep craters. And now, this year in April, NASA launched Artemis 2. This time, it's not just robots, but 4 humans who actually went there and saw it with their own eyes. And what they saw will blow your mind. So, what Artemis 2 saw on the dark sides of the moon. The Artemis 2 mission was launched on April 1st, 2026, and returned to Earth on April 10th. This 10-day journey took humans farther from Earth than anyone had ever gone before, reaching a distance of about 252,760 miles. On board were 4 astronauts: Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen. The part that actually matters happens on April 6th. During a 7-hour flyby, their Orion spacecraft moved behind the moon's far side. At exactly 6:41 p.m. Eastern Time, they captured one of the most striking images of the entire mission, a photo now known as Earthset. From their window, Earth appeared as a partially lit crescent with blue oceans and swirling white clouds, slowly dropping behind the moon's cratered horizon. The sunlit side showed regions over Oceania, while the darker half was already in the night. It looked calm, but the reality of it was something else, because as that happened, they lost contact. For about 40 minutes, their communication with Earth was completely cut off. The moon itself blocked all signals between the Orion spacecraft and NASA's Deep Space Network. It was planned, just like during the Apollo missions, but that doesn't change what it means. And while that silence held, the sky changed again. As the spacecraft dipped deeper behind the moon, the sun slipped out of view, and they witnessed a total solar eclipse, something no human had ever seen from that position before. The moon blocked the sun completely, leaving only the corona visible, stretching outward in thin, glowing strands. Victor Glover described it as a bright halo wrapping around the moon, while Jeremy Hansen later said the whole experience bent your mind. During that phase, which lasted close to an hour, they could also see bright planets like Mars, Venus, and Saturn, clearly visible alongside the stars. Then came something even harder to ignore. 6 separate flashes appeared across the lunar surface. These were not reflections or camera effects. They were meteoroids striking the moon at extremely high speeds, so creating visible bursts of light. The crew watched them happen in real time, something that had never been directly observed by humans from that vantage point before. It was a big moment. As they continued along the far side, the surface itself became more detailed the closer they looked. Impact craters stretched across the terrain, layered over ancient lava flows, with long cracks and ridges cutting through the landscape. Near the terminator line, the sharp boundary between light and darkness, the low angle of sunlight created long shadows. Glover pointed out how some valleys looked so deep and dark that it felt like you could fall straight into the moon's interior. During that same pass, the crew identified 2 previously unnamed craters and suggested names for them. One was Integrity, after their spacecraft's call sign, with the other was Carol, in memory of Reed Wiseman's late wife, who passed away in 2020. As the Orion spacecraft moved out from behind the moon, Earth came back into view, an Earthrise, reversing what they had seen earlier. Communication was reconnected almost immediately. By April 10th, when the mission ended, the crew had returned with hundreds of images that scientists are now studying to better understand how the moon formed and how its surface evolved over billions of years. And even with all of that, they came back saying the same thing. It still doesn't fully make sense until you see it for yourself. And without a single doubt, they're 100% right. Wild theories of alien bases. While the Artemis 2 astronauts didn't see any alien activity or unusual structures during their mission, there are a lot of theories out there that try to say otherwise, and some of them go way back. One idea that keeps coming up is how strange the moon itself is. People often point out that its size and distance feel almost too perfect. It's about 1/400th the size of the sun, but also roughly 400 times closer to Earth, which is why it can completely cover the sun during a solar eclipse. That kind of alignment isn't something you see everywhere. Then there's the fact that we only ever see one side of it, which, for a long time, made people wonder what might be hidden on the other side. Some even claim the moon didn't always exist in our sky. Stories from certain cultures, including Zulu traditions, have been interpreted by some experts as references to a time before the moon was there, and followed by a period where it somehow stabilized Earth's climate. There's no solid scientific backing for that idea, but it keeps getting mentioned in discussions around the moon's origin. Then things start getting more specific. During the Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 missions, there were claims that the moon might be hollow. After Apollo 12, NASA intentionally crashed part of the lunar module onto the surface and used seismometers to measure the impact. The readings showed vibrations that lasted longer than expected, which some people later described as the moon ringing like a bell. In reality, scientists explained this through the moon's dry and rigid internal structure, but that didn't stop the speculation. Then there's Ingo Swann, who was part of the US Stargate program during the Cold War. In his 1998 book Penetration, he claimed he was taken by a mysterious figure and asked to remote view the moon. According to him, he saw structures on the far side, towers, machinery, and what he believed were non-human beings. His story goes further, describing encounters that sound more like science fiction than documented reality. Another name that gets brought up is Carl Wolf. In the early 2000s, he claimed that in 1965, while working with classified lunar imagery at Langley Air Force Base, he was shown photos from the Lunar Orbiter program that appeared to show artificial structures, towers, dome-shaped buildings, and geometric layouts on the far side of the moon. He said the images were never released publicly. Of course, none of these claims has been confirmed, and that's where things get complicated. Because when you look at all of this together, the strange properties of the moon, the early mission data, and the Cold War secrecy, it creates just enough uncertainty for theories like these to keep going. But at the same time, it also makes it very easy for misinformation to slip in and mix with real science. Artemis 2, well, didn't find aliens. But the idea that something could be hidden out there is hard to dismiss. What is actually the dark side of the moon? So, it is completely dark? Well, the short answer to this question is no, it isn't. The dark side of the moon is simply the side we never get to see from Earth. And the reason for that isn't a mystery, it's timing. According to NASA, the moon takes about 29 days to orbit Earth, and almost the exact same time to rotate once on its own axis. Because of that perfect match, the same face is always turned toward us, while the other side stays hidden. But hidden doesn't mean dark. That far side actually receives just as much sunlight as the side we see. In fact, it's much brighter. The only time any part of the moon is truly dark is when it's facing away from the sun, just like night on Earth. So the name dark side was never about lighting. It was about not knowing what was there. And for most of human history, we really didn't. But that changed in 1959, when the Soviet spacecraft Luna 3 flew around the moon and captured the first images of the far side on October 7th. The pictures were rough, filled with static and distortion, but at the time, They were incredible. For the first time, humanity saw what had been completely hidden, and what they saw was different. The side we see from Earth is covered in dark patches called Maria, which are ancient lava flows that filled massive impact craters over time. These give the moon its familiar shadowy patterns, but the far side barely has any of that. Instead, it's dominated by lighter, heavily cratered highlands, which actually reflect more light. Some features discovered back then still stand out today. One of them is Mare Moscoviense, or the Sea of Moscow, and another is the Tsiolkovsky crater, named after Russian rocket pioneer Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. What's strange is that even massive impact zones like the South Pole Aitken Basin, stretching roughly 2,500 kilometers across, didn't fill with lava the way scientists expected. That alone is still a puzzle. We know a lot more about it now than we did 100 years ago, which is pretty insane. Yet at the same time, it feels like we know nothing. So, is something actually hidden on the dark side of the moon? There are a lot of crazy theories about the far side, but is it possible that it is hiding something that we're not being told about? Is nature trying to tell us something we're still too early to know? That's because the truth is, the moon has always been a little strange. For instance, the Apollo 10 mission back in 1969 picked up a whistling sound while passing over the far side, something the crew later described as outer space-type music. Then, Luna 3 revealed a surface that looked nothing like the side we know, and even now, that hidden half remains rougher, thicker, and harder to explain. Some people see cover-ups and secrets. Well, sure, they may be wrong, but the real mystery is simpler than aliens. Maybe the moon is not hiding life. Maybe it is hiding answers. And nature, slowly and quietly, is forcing us to keep looking. Well, that's all from us. What do you think about these wild theories? Well, whatever your answer is, let us know in the comments below, and be sure to like and subscribe. Until then, take care. We'll see you soon.